Hello, hello. Just a moment ago, I was I'm shooting this on the FX3, and I think it's fitting because I want to talk about the FX5 rumors. But I'm shooting this on uh, the 7 Artisans adapter, and I'm adapting my Canon EF 40mm 2.8 onto my FX3. So autofocus seems to be working pretty nicely, but we'll see how that works. I think Sony might be finally building the camera a lot of filmmakers have been asking for. I made a video recently about what I wanted from an FX3 Mark II, and I still stand by almost everything I said in that video. If you haven't seen it, go back and check it out after this video. I wanted to talk about what these rumors say about Sony's direction with the FX line, because I think that's actually the more interesting story. In my last video, I argued that Sony needed to create a more separation. They needed to create more separation between the Alpha line and the FX line. Personally, I'd be happy to pay a little bit more for a true cinema camera instead of another hybrid or a modified cinema camera hybrid. And from everything we're hearing, it looks like Sony might finally be moving into that direction. Yes, producing more specialized cameras costs more, but in the scheme of things, it's more likely to sell to the market it's aimed at. The hybrid market under $4,000 is incredibly saturated. Every manufacturer has great cameras with very similar feature sets. At some point, adding another hybrid doesn't really move the market forward in any meaningful way. So, as a business, it makes sense to step out of that arena until you actually have something to say. It just becomes a waste of resources at that point, in all honesty. So, addressing the rumors, the first thing I'm excited about is that it is rumored to have a 16 megapixel sensor. I mentioned that in my previous video. Andre Pizzini already talked about it a while back, but we don't know much about that sensor, if it's true or not. But it is rumored to shoot 5K, 3.2 open gate, which is great for the people that want that feature. Personally, I'm just happy that Sony didn't chase a higher megapixel count. It's actually kind of funny that Sony seems to be the company that's pushing back against the high megapixel race in the cinema lineup. They just announced the Sony Rialto 65 with a 9.6K 65 millimeter sensor, which is surprisingly low considering its sensor size. A lot of people were hoping a global shutter, but I never thought that it made much sense at the rumored price point. Honestly, if Sony gave me the right camera, I'd have no problem paying around $4,500 to $5,500. Sony has already shown with the FX3 and the A7S III that they can achieve incredibly fast sensor readout with their current CMOS technology. CMOS technology has improved so much that global shutter isn't nearly as important as it used to be, especially when it comes with trade-offs in dynamic range and low light performance. Sure, it's getting better. The $6,500 A9 III proves that. I'm just not convinced that the features I'd prioritize in a camera that sits between the FX3 and the FX6 budget. The next rumor is that I really like is that Sony's moving away from the alpha menu. Whether that's a Venice-inspired interface, the actual Venice menu, or something similar to what Canon's doing, where they separate the photo and cinema modes and they have the cinema menu. I think it's a step in the right direction. Personally, I'd go one step further and just remove photo mode completely. The FX line should feel like cinema cameras. The FX line should be how Sony's FS line was. There's also a rumor for triple base ISO. Canon has shown how useful triple base native ISO can be, especially for documentaries and run and gun productions where lighting changes constantly. If Sony's bringing that over, that's a huge win. Sony's recent sensor and processor technology is telling us about the future of Sony cameras. If you look at the A7R6, Sony somehow managed to make a 66 megapixel sensor readout faster than almost all the competitors at an even lower resolution sensor point. If you can do that with a 66 megapixel sensor, imagine what they could do with a purpose-built 16 megapixel sensor can do. My prediction is that Sony isn't using all of that extra speed just to reduce rolling shutter. They're using it for something bigger. I think there's a real possibility we can see some form of dual gain HDR that's fast enough to behave like a normal single exposure readout. If that happens, we'd get HDR with far fewer compromises than we've seen before. And this is what I think. This is why I think global shutter is pointless. To me, that's far more exciting to think about. That also starts to actually push these cameras in in the lower price range closer to the Aries, the Venice, the Red V Raptors, and all those territories. Sure, Panasonic has the Arilog C3 and dual gain implementation, and it's excellent, but it still comes with a noticeable hit in readout speed in the ES1 series. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still great, but it does limit what you can actually shoot with it. And it's just another reminder that processing power matters just as much as the sensor itself. Everyone is focused on the megapixels and the open gate, but having a sensor that has triple base ISO and DGO and potentially fast readout speeds, faster than everyone else, is mind-boggling to me. I feel like that is significantly more impressive than having global shutter with good dynamic range. While we're still on the sensor, and I mentioned it before, OpenGate, I'm hearing comments from people that it'll stay in the FX line, and honestly, that would make sense, but I don't know if that's the route they'll go. While I do believe Sony needs a clearer separation between the Alpha and the FX line, I know the market of cameras are now rich with these features and becoming standards for purchase. The A7R6 it's not just another camera. It's introducing a new battery, a new processor, and new operating system. That tells me Sony's building a new hardware platform that future cameras can share. Canon quietly did something very similar. The Digic DV7 and the Digic X processors. The Canon C50 uses the Cinema Line processors, and the RX3 and the V uses the Digic X processors. But they're able to port some of the features over to each other. And it doesn't matter that they're different processors. And the Digic DV7, I just said it, the DV7 is able to house two operating systems in it. That's a pretty incredible feat, in my opinion. That's not an easy thing to simply do. I think Sony's finally doing the same thing. I think Sony's doing the same thing. And I think it's actually started quite a bit ago. I actually think it started with the Burano. Because the Burano, if you really look at it, it combines the Venice's image processing for colors and OpenGate with the Beyond's XR processing to support autofocus, IBIS, and touchscreen controls. And this is all controlled via a hybrid Venice FX style operating system. To me, the Burano feels like a it's less of a standalone product and more like Sony's prototype for the future FX lineup. It worked out the hardware. It worked out the software. Now those technologies can trickle down. And that's why I don't think the FX5 will be just a replacement FX3. I think it's a redefined entry point into Sony's cinema ecosystem. The Burano has effectively become the flagship compact FX lineup. That leaves room for the FX6 to move further up market, while the FX5 grows into something much closer to a hybrid of the FX3 and the FX6, instead of just being an FX3 with a few extra features. And this is exactly what I stated that they should do in my last video. And honestly, that's exactly what I think Sony needs. Leave photography to the Alpha line, the A7S4, and make a content camera with whatever replaces the ZVE1. And let the FX line become the cinema first camera, much like how the FS line was. If these rumors are true, I think Sony isn't just launching another camera. I think they're redefining what the FX line is supposed to be. And that's a much bigger story than whether a camera shoots OpenGate or has triple base ISO. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? What would you rather Sony continue making hybrid cameras, or would you be willing to pay more for a dedicated cinema camera? The more I hear about these rumors, the more excited I am about it. Will I buy it? I don't know. It looks like it's going to have IBIS, so and that's something that I stated that I did not want in my next cinema camera purchase. So I may venture elsewhere. Who knows? Or I'll just continue using my FX3. I love this camera so much, as it's still a very capable camera. Let me know in the comments, as always. And as always, Thanks for hanging out and have a wonderful day.